Welcome to Fantasy Football Across America. I am in Minnesota, joined by the very special guest today, Evan Ringler. How are you doing, Evan?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
So where are we, Evan?
We are in Northfield, Minnesota. It's about 45 minutes south of Minneapolis.
And is there anything I should be aware of to do here?
Not really. It's a super small town. Everything closes about 9 p.m. So yeah, you're not going to have too much fun in Northfield.
Okay. Well, I've been warned. I mean, you guys, I guess, haven't seen the Evan Ringler basement very many times, but as someone who has been on many calls with Evan, this is kind of funny being down here. Very, very special space to those of us who are in the player profiler community. So Evan, let's get started. What's your favorite football memory? Like any game you've been to or just like watched and really remember vividly?
Yeah, I'd say the first one that comes to mind is Super Bowl 48, Seahawks fan. But I'd say the favorite one would be last year I was lucky enough to go to Seahawks Broncos week 1, Russell Wilson's return to Seattle.
Oh, wow.
And it was just electric. When you came out of the tunnel, the boos were just raining down. It was so much fun. And everyone chanting Geno. At that point, no one really knew much about Geno and if he was actually going to be good. So seeing how well he played in that game, that was just awesome.
Yeah, I mean, that was a game. The Broncos were favored by what, like 4 or 5 points on the road?
Yeah.
Like no one thought the Seahawks had any shot of winning that game. And then to hold on to that win the way they did, I just remember that like 2-minute drill with Hackett.
Yeah.
That was
just
a sign of like disasters to come.
Yeah.
Pretty fun game to be at, though.
So much fun. Yeah. The way the fans were treating Russ, it was just amazing. Because like everyone loved Russ when he was in Seattle, but once he left, all these stories started coming out about how all his teammates hated him and he's a diva and all this stuff. So the fans really jumped on that.
So what's your take on Russ now?
I mean, he's solid enough. I think the Sean Payton offense is much better for him than Hackett, obviously. Not saying much, but he's not anything great, but he's fine.
All right, and we're going to continue with this episode of Fantasy Football Across America after a quick word from our boss, the Podfather.
All right, I want to take a moment today to talk to you about data analysis. The data analysis tool, we listen to the users. What do you want? What do you need? And we made it happen. We added popular reports like a fantasy scoring report, air yards report. And if you want to create a new report, but you don't necessarily want to look through every field, we have quick results. Hey, show me the most popular passing data. Show me the most popular rushing data, fantasy data. Done. And the thing just is much faster than it's ever been. And the report builder got a lot easier. I mean, check this out. We break it down into offense, defense. Show me just fantasy data elements. And then when you get results, hey, show me by draft year. Let's take a look at just certain players that played a certain number of snaps or a certain number of games last year. This is the tool that so many of you have been asking for, plus a bunch of dream features that Billy wanted and Cody wanted and I wanted and Dario wanted. So go to the fantasy tools section, click on data analysis, or go to playerprofiler.com/data-analysis.
And we are back. I think this is episode 10 of Fantasy Football Across America. So very quickly making our way around. And this is one of multiple Minnesota episodes that we will have. So keep your eyes peeled on the Player Profiler YouTube channel, the podcast, of course. But today's guest, Evan, I'd say we've known each other for what, like 8 months now?
Something like that. I started in March.
Yeah, it's been Evan started out as the analytics intern for Player Profiler, and you've been doing an awesome job. And now you're like analytics. I don't know what is
projections and rankings guru.
Yeah,
is what Matt said.
That's pretty accurate. So Evan, how did you get into fantasy football? Do you remember how that all began for you?
Yeah, so my first league was around 2012. So I was 12 years old at that time. And the only thing I remember about my first draft, I don't remember my first pick, but I remember that it was a 1 quarterback league, super shallow. And I walked out of the draft with 3 quarterbacks because I just had no idea what I was doing. And the first 2 quarterbacks had the same bye week. So, of course, I had to draft a third.
Yeah, I mean, that makes perfect sense for 12-year-old Evan.
Yeah.
And then what like led you down the super deep rabbit hole? I mean, I know you play in some intense leagues. Like what happened there?
Yeah. So during the pandemic, my siblings and I all got COVID at the same time. We got locked in the basement together, and we decided to do a new Dynasty startup. I had never played Dynasty at this point. I had never played IDP, but we jumped right into a 16-team Superflex, start 11 offense, 11 IDP, and it really was. I made some big mistakes. Like I didn't know what I was doing at all, but I absolutely love Dynasty now, and I love IDP, and I think it was actually a really good way to jump into it.
So what's that? That was in, I guess, 2020, or was that 2021?
January 2021.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, so that league you've played 2 seasons now. How have you done in that league?
Not good. I went the productive struggle route, and it's going well. My team was good enough to compete in year 1, but I just didn't know it yet. Like I said, it was my first ever Dynasty league, first ever IDP league. I should have competed year 1, but I didn't. So now I am in the productive struggle, and next year it's looking really well. It's 16-team Superflex. I got Kyler, A-Rich, Bryce Young, Sam Howell. So the quarterbacks are what's most important.
Okay, good to know. Yeah, and then, I mean, I've never played in an IDP league, so just give me, I think this is a good platform for you to like, try to convince me to join an IDP league, but also like let people know why they're worth playing in general.
Yeah, so it makes Sundays just so much more fun, because every sack somebody's getting like 6 points. Last week, Khalil Mack, 6 sacks. He dropped 90 points in my league.
Oh my God.
It makes it so much more fun to have just huge performances like that on both sides of the ball, and you're cheering for all the players on the field, not just the wide receivers, running backs. That's the main aspect. It makes watching games so much more fun.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that before, because like when you watch a game and you have a guy on your fantasy team, like you're thinking about, oh man, I hope they throw the ball to Terry McLaurin right now. But if you have someone on both sides of the ball in every game, like that sounds pretty fun.
Yeah.
And then I think also like I kind of wanted to talk to you about what specifically led you down the path to football analytics, right? Because I mean, that's kind of the one thing we have in common, and the one thing that we sort of cooperate over now. So like, what got you into analytics in general?
It's hard to say. When I was 12 and started my first fantasy football league, I was already kind of getting into it. I remember writing down on paper every running back's yards before contact per carry and yards after contact per carry, and then using that to create my own rankings. So this has been going on for a while, but I really didn't do much of anything in football analytics until December of 2022. I saw that PlayerProfiler had a job opening for an analytics intern. So I decided to do some cool projects involving one of them was an auto draft neural net, and that really helped me land the job. And from there, I've just been learning and really grateful to be a part of this.
Yeah, no, it's been, like I said, you've been done an awesome job. And I mean, the Rate My Team tool, I think that's another great thing we can talk about here, is let the people know like what went into building the Rate My Team tool, because that's something I know it's not really in vogue anymore. Everyone's already drafted their teams, but that Rate My Team tool is going to stick around in the Player Profiler draft kit for years to come, I think. So what went into that?
Yeah, so that was pretty much most of my summer was spent on the Rate My Team tool. Essentially what it does is you plug in your team, you plug in your format, and I simulate how your team will perform against a league average team for your format. And I run 500 simulations, and we look at the win rate and the point differential and all that kind of stuff, and use that to generate a grade for how well your team performed.
Yeah, no, I think that was a really healthy like brainstorming project for both of us.
Definitely.
Like we had so many meetings that were like, where would you even begin to think about the range of outcomes for players like that, and simulating that. And that was a pretty cool thing. And then now you're contributing quite a bit to the Player Profiler Dynasty rankings, which also, run a pretty sophisticated algorithm, like kind of at the meat of it. So I think, I kind of wanted to ask you like to share with, to some extent, I suppose, like how that all works and what your weekly process kind of looks like with the dynasty rankings.
Yeah. So we make little manual tweaks throughout the week, but the bulk of the projections or the bulk of the dynasty rankings come from our projections algorithm, which takes our rest of season projections and projects them out for 2 extra years. So 2023, 2024, and 2025. And then we use those 3 years of projections to generate a lifetime value rating.
Yep. And then, I mean, there's what do you like? How should people think of the lifetime value rating in terms of like when they're looking at the dynasty rankings?
Well, I do think that the win now and rebuild rankings, those can be super, super helpful to toggle between those two for sure. It's tough to say like exactly what the lifetime value represents. Essentially, it's it's not really lifetime value. It's like 3-year value. How much value is this player going to contribute over a replacement player over the next 3 years? That's pretty much what it's saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then I think also while we're talking about dynasty, like, are there any players that you are particularly pounding the table for right now that you think are maybe underrated or just like not getting enough attention?
Yeah. Someone I've been on all summer was Hollywood Brown. He got a lot of hate this summer because of the situation, but people are starting to see now the situation is not as bad as we expected. I don't really expect Joshua Dobbs to continue playing as well as he has, but the fact is that Hollywood Brown has always commanded targets and he's always put up fantasy points. And when Kyler comes back, hopefully Kyler comes back. I really need him to come back. When that happens, if that happens, Hollywood's going to smash. So yeah, I'm huge on Hollywood.
Did you see that story about how there's like kind of the rumors that the Cardinals don't want to keep Kyler around?
I saw that. Yeah. I hope it's not the case. I'm a big Kyler fan. I think everyone hates on him too much as well, but I hope the Cardinals keep winning games with Josh Dobbs. I really do, just so Kyler stays there. And that franchise is in a really good position no matter what, because they got a bunch of extra picks from the Texans.
Yep, for sure. And then, yeah, is there anyone else in Dynasty that you're like actively trading for to get on your rosters? And it can be IDP guys too. Give us the random backup cornerbacks and everything.
Well, a little IDP tidbit is that cornerbacks are completely irrelevant pretty much. You can just stream them from the waiver wire. So that's what I always do. But the quarterbacks, especially Joe Burrow and Trevor Lawrence, those are the guys that I've been sending a lot of offers on this week, especially on my rebuilding teams. I really, really want to go get Joe Burrow. I don't think he's going to be very good this year for the rest of the year, but he's guaranteed to bounce back next year. Like there's very little risk there. And for Trevor Lawrence, I think that he could bounce back the rest of this year and actually be serviceable on your contenders to maybe even elite. We'll see.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And then what about redraft? Is there anyone that you think has maybe had good indicators underlying these first few weeks, but just hasn't popped yet, or that you think is like, yeah, just especially going to burst down the stretch this season?
Yeah. I was out on Rashee Rice all summer. I didn't like the profile or the analytics behind him, but I'm all in on him now. I think he's going to keep seeing more routes and more targets. The analytics through 4 weeks have been very good. His targets per route run has been great. So yeah, I think Rashee Rice is a great target in all formats, honestly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, his like you said, you were telling me earlier, his targets per route run is second in the league right now behind Devontae Adams, which is pretty insane to think about.
Yeah.
But that kind of leads me into my next question, which is like, what are some specific analytics indicators that you kind of like to key in on when you're analyzing any particular types of, I guess, let's start with running backs.
For running backs, I think the the key metrics on Player Profiler to judge whether a running back is actually good or not. The ones I like are juke rate and yards created per touch, stuff like that. But a lot of that stuff doesn't matter as much at the running back position because, frankly, it's all about volume. And if there's injuries to other running backs in their backfield, then it doesn't matter how good that player is; they're going to smash regardless. Going to wide receivers, though, we want to see routes increasing, we want to see targets increasing, and we want to see guys that are running a complete route tree, not guys like Kadarius Toney or Rondale Moore. We want to see, or even Jackson Smith and Jigba. Actually, we want to see guys that are catching the ball more than 2 yards downfield. That's something good to look for.
Yeah, I mean, that's what has me worried a little bit about Elijah Moore. Like, it seems like they've shifted his role to be a little more line of scrimmage, gadgety.
Yeah.
And like, cause he had some games with pretty good air yards the first 2 weeks. And then week 3, it was just like all at the line of scrimmage. Week 4, he had that carry that he lost 20 yards. Like, that was
ridiculous.
I don't know.
I was so mad.
So, and that was, of course, a DTR game. So like, I think the Browns are kind of not been because the Browns were a team people talked about with like the wide range of outcomes and like, what if Deshaun Watson hits? And that just has not been the case at all.
No, I do think I am higher than consensus on Watson. I thought his last game that he played was actually pretty good. Dario was at the game and he told me he looked horrible, but I disagree. So, agree to disagree on that.
Yeah, he had his moments, but the touchdown, I mean, like any high school quarterback could have hit Amari Cooper for that long touchdown.
Yeah, true.
So,
and he did, throw a ball towards the other end zone. That happened.
That was, I mean, he's doing some wacky stuff over there, Deshaun.
Yeah.
But I think that leads to my next question, which is like, what's a team that you think is going to make the playoffs that people don't currently expect to make the playoffs? Because I think the Browns are one of those like fringy teams. Who's another one that you're kind of buying the hype on right now?
Yeah, I do think the Browns will have a good shot to make the playoffs. That defense is amazing.
Historic.
But I'm going to talk about the Atlanta Falcons, who no one wants to hear about, but they're going to make the playoffs this year, and Arthur Smith is going to stay as the head coach, and Kyle Pitts is going to, stay in the doghouse for another year, unfortunately. But, the efficiency with which they're running the ball right now is very good, and I think it's going to be just fine for them because their defense has gotten a lot better from last year as well.
I mean, Jesse Bates is incredible.
He is amazing. He really is. And I it's really disappointing for the receivers, but the division is so bad as well. Like, I think they have a very good chance to make the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, that division, I think the Bucks starting 3-1 is another big surprise. Like, do you think they're for real? Do you think that the Falcons are going to sweep the division out from under them? Like, what's your read on the NFC South right now?
Honestly, it is up in the air. And when I say I like the Falcons, that that could easily not come to fruition. It could be the Saints or the Bucks, but I think the Bucks are overperforming. I'm not in on Baker. I know Dario is.
I'm getting there.
Dario's a big Baker guy all of a sudden. But I just don't trust Baker. That's what it comes down to. The defense is legit, though. I think you would probably say that the Saints and then the Bucks and then the Falcons have the best defenses in that division. So maybe my take on the Falcons is not going to come to fruition, but I'll be rooting for it just because I like negativity.
You just like fewer fantasy points being scored.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that what you're rooting for?
Exactly.
I think the bull case for Baker is like he was playing through that shoulder injury his last year in Cleveland. I mean, that game for the Rams last season, you guys remember that? I mean, come on. I think he can be a fun guy to root for. And the way their offense is humming right now, these first 3 weeks, has been really impressive. I mean, Rachaad White can't get 2 yards of blocking for his life right now, but their passing game has been rolling. Like, they're, one of the big questions we had for seasonal projections coming in was how much less how many fewer pass attempts are the Bucs going to have? Because like Tom Brady
Yeah.
was just setting the record every year. And I mean, everyone in the world knocked them down significantly. And they've actually been throwing the ball like more than we had projected them to.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think they're also throwing the ball further downfield than we expected, like especially compared to Brady last year. I mean, we probably should have seen Mike Evans coming a little bit. Just because of that. Like last year, Brady was getting rid of the football faster than almost anybody ever, I believe. And obviously Baker's not going to do that. He's much younger.
He's a gamer. Yeah, and I mean Mike Evans, I was looking at his player page the other day. His targets per route run is the highest it's been in like 4 or 5 years. Like Mike Evans is having a legit resurgence. So I don't know, little friendly Bucks versus Falcons bet is what I'm hearing here.
Sure, let's do it.
But another thing we can talk about today is, it's Saturday right now, middle of week 5, got games tomorrow, but this probably isn't going to be released until after those games tomorrow. But let's talk about the Thursday night game, because we just witnessed DJ Moore have an all-time performance among wide receivers. Justin Fields looked good again. What did you make of that Bears-Commanders game on Thursday night?
Yeah, I think the number one takeaway is that Emmanuel Forbes was a horrible draft pick, and he can't tackle anybody. I think it's less about the Bears' offense and more about that Commanders' secondary and just how awful it looked. And it was mostly Emmanuel Forbes just not being able to tackle anyone. It's not like Fields looked amazing during that game. He was pretty much just normal Justin Fields, but he got a lot of yak, and I think his completion percentage was still under 50%. I think Fields is going to be great in fantasy for the rest of the year. He's got 3 great matchups coming up, but in Dynasty, I am looking to sell over the next 3 weeks. I mean, you got a little bit of time because these matchups are so good coming up, but yeah, you have to sell before the end of the year.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then that you saying that about Emmanuel Forbes actually made me think, like, in IDP leagues, do you get negative points if your corner is the one giving up like yards or touchdowns, or missed tackles counted in some IDP leagues?
In some, yes. In most leagues, no. It's just for corners, it's tackles and passes defended and interceptions. So really, you want the guys that are getting thrown at the most. Like you don't want the Jalen Ramseys in his prime, because no one's going to throw at him. You want the guy across from him. Like this year, no one wants to throw at Sauce Gardner. So I love DJ Reed in IDP leagues, because he's a good player in his own right, but he's going to get a lot more targets.
That's kind of counterintuitive to like rewarding who's actually better at football within their position.
Yeah, the cornerback position is definitely iffy for IDP leagues.
Interesting. The -1 point for IDP there. And then what specific IDP format would you say is your or I guess what's your favorite fantasy football format in general? I'm going to guess it has some IDP elements involved, but like spell it out for me. What's the perfect league?
Yeah, this offseason, I started a league with my brothers called the Holy Grail, and I truly believe it to be the Holy Grail of fantasy football. It is a dynasty league. It was an auction startup with contracts. It's Superflex, start 11 offense, start 11 IDPs, and it has tight end premium, D tackle premium, DN premium, all that kind of stuff. It's the Holy Grail.
How many teams did you say that one was?
12? Only 12 teams.
Okay. Yeah. No,
I could go up to 14, or I play in some 16 team Superflex as well, and it's fun, but it makes it a lot harder if you don't have a quarterback.
How deep is the roster in like a 12 team start 11 and 11? Because I mean, that's already 22 guys that need to start. How deep do the benches get to go?
Generally, I would advise it to be around 50, 53. I think 53 is nice because that's like what the NFL does. But that Holy Grail league, we actually have a 40-man roster, which makes the waiver wire super good. But people still aren't, you're not like churning the waiver wire every week because of the contracts. And if you cut somebody, you have to pay for half their salary still.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. That makes sense. And then, I was going to say, especially in like a 50 deep roster, like the guys on the waiver must be like just barely hanging on to
Useless.
NFL rosters,
Yeah.
right?
Unless they're cornerbacks. You can get cornerbacks off waivers, but nobody else.
Huh. This is a fascinating world right here that I'm becoming privy to. And then I guess as we start to kind of get more into the less fantasy intense segment of the show, I was wondering, like, you said you had a really good football podcast recommendation for me.
Yeah. So a couple months ago, The Athletic dropped a podcast series called The Play Callers. And the basic format of it is they bring on Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, Mike McDaniel, all these Matt LaFleur too, all these coaches from that tree, and they talk about not only like their scheme and where it came from, but also like their backstory. They all work together in Tampa Bay and in Washington, back for Mike Shanahan. So yeah, it's a super cool pod. I'd say it's the peak of football content.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. I mean, like I've had it on my, like, in my queue or like my Spotify, like added to my listens, but I've been wanting to get around to it.
Yeah,
so
awesome.
it is crazy to think about how all of those dudes were like together and kind of basically are now spreading the next like evolution of NFL offense.
Yeah,
to their
they're all
various
basically
teams.
interns. They called themselves the Piss Boys. I believe it was something like everyone else is just always pissing on them. They got to do whatever dirty work, just needs to get done. I believe it was like a lot of data entry and stuff like that. Super boring work, but it's crazy how far they've come.
Yeah, I mean, they're all head coaches now. It's pretty sick.
Yeah.
And then let's veer away from the football conversation for a little bit. I mean, we're in Minnesota, but you said you haven't lived here very long, right?
Yeah, I grew up in the Vegas area in the suburbs, and I went to college in Tacoma, Washington, and then I graduated in May and moved out here to Minnesota to be with my family.
So what's like that's a lot of like very different climates there, right? I mean, Vegas, Pacific Northwest, Minnesota, like,
yeah,
you must have some preferences, a favorite time of year, like a favorite, like give me a weather take.
Yeah, I'll never move back to Vegas. I just can't do it. Too much sunshine, too much heat. And then I immediately went to the Pacific Northwest to get the exact opposite experience. And that was great for the first few years, but then eventually you get tired of 6 months straight without seeing the sun. So I'm gonna give Minnesota a try now. But I'd say that my favorite time of year is summer in the Pacific Northwest. It's absolutely beautiful. But the winters are just super sad and depressing. You don't see the sun.
Right. I mean, I think Portland, Oregon is where they, I think, identified seasonal depression as like a phenomenon that existed.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
So, yeah, I mean, because I'm from California, so I think like anytime I think about going anywhere else, it's just like, oh, but the weather. So, I mean, these last couple nights,
you're spoiled.
Exactly. I mean, I guess Vegas, you kind of get that.
Yeah, I mean, it's always nice, but is 110 nice? Like, you can't really go outside,
right?
So like there were some days where I would be playing baseball in 117-degree weather, and that was not fun.
So maybe you kind of just got like overexposed to the sunlight, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I got underexposed. So I'm hoping Minnesota can be like a happy medium. I'm looking forward to the winter though. I haven't been in a super snowy winter yet, so that should be fun.
Yeah, no, that'll be cool. Maybe a white Christmas for a guy from Vegas. That'll be interesting. And then at the college you went to in Washington, I remember you saying you played baseball there. Like, what was student athlete life like?
Yeah, so it's a lot different than, just going to college without playing sports. Essentially, my whole life was just school and baseball. I didn't really have much time for other stuff. It was, we'd be lifting with the team in the morning, and then I'd go to class, and then I'd go to practice, and then I'd get home, do my homework, and then do it all again the next day. And honestly, it was super fun. Anyone who can play college sports, I would recommend that you do, because you just get instant friends right away. You don't have to, go through that whole process of finding your people. You already found them. So yeah, it really is awesome. And it was just so much fun.
And what position did you play in baseball? Like, how many years did you play, or did you bat 300? Like,
I was a pitcher. I was a right-handed pitcher. I didn't play much my freshman year. My sophomore year, I tore my labrum in my shoulder. That made me be out for my sophomore and junior years. And then my senior year, I didn't play much either, but I had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun.
Oh, sorry for asking.
That's what it's really about.
Damn. No, yeah. I mean, I played baseball up until high school, and I still feel like my right shoulder's like a little messed up from it.
Yeah.
So
my shoulder is messed up forever, for sure.
Yeah. I mean,
but it was worth it.
The price you pay. Damn. And then I'm curious, like, did analytics at all like tie into that student athlete experience? Like, how did maybe your guys' team, like, were you, like, was there any relationship at all there with the data?
No. Yeah, my coach was super old school. Like, yeah, he had trouble embracing analytics for sure. I think he's like starting to slowly, but it's definitely a little bit behind the curve there. Yeah.
No, like TrackMan
we bought a Rapsodo, which is like a version of the TrackMan. We bought one, I think it was my junior year, but we didn't really use it too much. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. No, baseball has definitely like always been the cutting edge of sports analytics.
We really should have. It would have helped. It would have helped a lot. Yeah, I would have really loved to see, like after my labrum surgery, my velocity was way down. So I had to find this new splitter grip that was super fun. And I would have loved to see the analytics on that, but unfortunately I was never able to. Damn.
Spin rate pre and post injury. But that's cool that you were able to come back and play at least somewhat after that. Because I mean, I've also torn my labrum in my other shoulder, so that's not a fun
brutal
rehab.
Shoulders are the worst, man.
Yeah. And then, do you have any hobbies also outside of, I guess, like football or baseball that we haven't talked about yet? Anything that you like to do with your free time?
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. Pretty much all my hobbies revolve around sports. That's just my life. This year I watched probably 90% of the Seattle Mariners games, which there's 162 of them, so that's a lot of time.
Yep.
And then of course they broke my heart in game 161. So thanks for that. We'll be back next year. Go M's. I also play quite a bit of video games, but it's mostly sports video games too.
You playing Call of Duty with Kyler sometimes or anything like that?
I wish. That'd be sick. Oh, that'd be so cool.
Yeah, no, and then I was just about to ask you something else with the Mariners. Like, I'm not following baseball that closely. They just like tailed off and missed the playoffs.
Yeah, it was a really weird season. They were pretty mediocre for the first half, and then I'd say August especially, they were just on fire. I think they set a record for the most wins in a month in Mariner history, and they went on like multiple 10-game win streaks. It was so much fun. But yeah, they fell off at the end and broke my heart. But it's okay because last year made up for it all. Last year I was able to go to the first Seattle Mariners playoff game in Seattle in 21 years. So that was just absolutely electric. One of the best experiences of my life. And yeah, never be able to recreate that. Wow. Although, of course, we did lose in 18 innings. There was 0 runs scored until the 18th inning. So that's baseball.
Yeah, that's insane. And wait, so how did you become a Mariners and Seahawks fan growing up in Las Vegas?
Yeah, so my dad is from the Pacific Northwest, so he's always been a fan of those teams, and yeah, followed me along, or I followed him along. Growing up in Henderson, our basement was just full of Mariners and Seahawks posters and bobbleheads and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I've been a fan my whole life.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. That's really cool. Any other final thoughts before we get out of here? Anything the people should know about you?
I don't think so. Thanks for having me on, Dario. You can follow me on Twitter at Evan Ringler FF. I don't tweet much, but I probably should more.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Of course. I mean, once I knew I would be in the Minnesota area, I was like, I got to get a show on with Evan because we've been spending a lot of time together on Google Meet these last few months talking about every player under the sun. So
Yep.
we could, we could probably go on for 8 hours if we wanted to. But yeah, this is really awesome to have you on. And everyone, make sure you tune in to the next episode of Fantasy Football Across America.
Hey, I want to take a moment to thank you for tuning in. It's important to me that all of our media be free. This is only possible because of you allowing a true independent sports media enterprise to thrive unlike any other in the business. So please subscribe to the All In package to continue to make all of this possible, to ensure that all of our stats, information, data, content is available to you, especially you, the people that get the site and get the show.